So,
All right, moving on.
I guess the next topic, what did I have here? I broke out the list.
The list?
Yes, the
Japanese role-playing game names?
No, not that list. Just
I want to play
list.
Dream Sword 3, The Spirits Within.
The list of topics that
You know, I was talking to Richard, and he actually played that Alchemy Meister game.
Can we get him on here one day just so he can describe the experience?
Yeah, maybe.
Our obscure JRPG correspondent, Richard. But no, our next topic will be, what does a modern game need to have today?
Story.
No, so I mean, like,
story.
Well, okay, well, it has to have a story, but I'm talking more about like different features. So I mean, like an autosave, pause when the controller dies.
So you mean from like a technical standpoint?
Yeah, configurable controls. I mean, like, what does a modern day video game have to have to the point where you're playing it and it's like, wow, it doesn't do that? Like, what is going on here, sort of thing?
Pause when the controller dies is a must.
Yeah.
I was shocked that not all games do that.
It's kind of something that you need.
Because what if you're in like a hectic firefight and no, let's just combine things. So like that and autosave. However, autosave can kind of be like torn on and off. Like I do like the idea of save points in Final Fantasy games because it gives you something.
Yeah, it depends on more so the type of game.
But like, let's say for instance you're playing like a first-person shooter. That needs autosave. Why? I'll give you an example. You're playing through the game. You're playing through the campaign. It's about 8 hours. You're about 4 hours in. You haven't, like, you don't, not every 5 minutes you press start and go to save. And you get there, you're in a huge firefight, and all of a sudden your controller dies, but your game doesn't pause. You get shot, you die, you go back to the very beginning. Do you know, I would quit gaming if that happened.
I was just thinking, imagine if like, so I'm assuming both of you played Pokemon like me, where you would save after each Elite Four member in Pokemon, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And if like you lost against one of them, you just soft restart.
Yeah.
But what if in a Pokemon game they actually auto-saved you after each one?
Like autosave is good because a lot of like games try to immerse you in now, and it's like it breaks the immersion when you have to press start and go in.
Yeah, but if you're doing like an RPG or something, you don't want an autosave because then you can at least soft reset if you have to.
Like I do like the save points ideas in games like Final Fantasy or Pokemon. I do like where, well, no, in Pokemon you can save anywhere, but like autosave is for certain games, I think. It's hard to explain what, like, I kind of find it hard to explain to say which games should and shouldn't have autosave.
I think it's more so if it's like a roguelike game, then you probably shouldn't have autosave. Because saving is like a part of the game then. Right? Like,
yeah.
If it's like, okay, you want to save your progress, but if the game saves it automatically for you, then it's just kind of holding your hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did I ever tell you too about my little XCOM fiasco?
What, did you get like stuck in an infinite save loop or something like that?
No, my save file got corrupted in the end game, and it sucked.
I would have cried. I would have cried.
That's not really related to anything, but yeah.
Oh, here's something that all games must need: quality control. Make sure that when they release the goddamn game, they don't have to patch it day one.
Are you listening to us, Steam Greenlight?
Another one, I think configurable controls is one as well, because like especially for like first person shooters, like a lot of people like to
if you want to invert it on
they like invert or but again, like it depends on the game. It's not like it's hard to pick out things that all games need.
There are a lot of people that want to have like 100% configurable controls, so like any action can be put to any button. Because some people have disabilities and they can't use a part of the controller.
Yeah.
So there are people that are saying that from just that standpoint alone, this should be done for that.
Well, yeah, it should be done for that so that like games can be accessible for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you only have one arm, like and you don't have another arm, like there should be a way where you can configure the controller so that you can only use one arm. So, like what did you say? Like, was that your example? I think I may have just stole your example.
Oh, yeah, something like that, yeah. I never said an example, so I just said had a disability.
But yeah, like, So I think like as a universal thing, you should think of it in how can I make this game accessible for everyone? Not in the sense of how can I make this game accessible for every demographic. So let's make every game a shooter with multiplayer, with dark brown, grays and stuff. No, more like in terms of how you actually play the game, physically interact with the game, with the controller. The controller is the way you interact with it. How can we make it so that you can change the controls so every single person who plays this game will have a way to enjoy it?
Yeah.
I think controls are the biggest one.
The only problem with that would be is then you're going to get somebody where it's like, oh, this is the ultimate setup for this, right? So whereas like if some games, something like I'm trying to think of like you can only configure the shoulder buttons a certain way or something like that, right? Like what if somebody made the fire button X, right? Or like the main button, and then so you could have like, okay, people are going to be putting out button tutorials to help you be better at the game, right? Like, this is how you set it up. It's like you put this thing you map this action to this button and blah, 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 and you do all that, right?
Right.
And I mean, like, it sort of goes back to the inverted versus non-inverted, right?
It's still not friends, very inverted.
Okay, Skrillex.
Yeah, there we go.
I think we made out what you said. But,
yeah, no, I got what you said. Controls are the biggest one, though, but nothing's ever going to be perfect. There's always going to be problems. There's always going to be ways to like game the system. No pun.
Would you play a game that didn't have, I want to say a pause screen, but not necessarily a pause screen. I mean, an interactive menu that you can bring up. Would you play a game that didn't have that?
Yeah. Yeah, I would.
Is there a game out there?
There probably is.
This is kind of like
Journey.
Well,
Sort of like that.
Pac-Man
Journey was like
doesn't
that.
have that.
Well, games in short bursts. Like, say if you're playing Pac-Man, then no. Or games like Tetris, in a sense. Like if you're playing Skyrim or something, and you gotta go to the
you need that menu in Skyrim.
Yeah, like
yeah, you
so,
do.
Again, it comes back to some games need it, some games don't.
Well, like, do you remember when I was trying to come up with ideas for a video game? Would you guys still need to help me finish the story for that?
Yeah, we do.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, we do.
Like when I was imagining it, I didn't have an interactive menu thought up.
No, you wanted your game to be seamless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that makes
I know,
sense.
that's a thing for a different Nerdcast, I guess.
I'm just trying to think of something, like some aspect of games that almost all of them have, like, could we do without it? From a design standpoint.
Well, I know that in Skyrim, I guess Skyrim's a good example. There's actually 2 pause menus. There's one where you can pull up like your inventory and your skills and your map and junk, and another one just sort of, what quests do I have?
Yeah.
How can I save? What are my options right now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I feel like we're having a brainstorming meeting for Will's game design thing right now.
Well, I guess this is a discussion on game design in general, where it's like,
Yeah.
what does a modern game actually like need anything? So like when you start, you say, we're gonna make a game, it's gonna have XXXXX, but it needs to do this. Is that even in a discussion? Like, is there something that needs to be on that checklist that, like, I guess you could say what makes a game, like...
From a technical standpoint, I'm going to say it's pretty free. From a creative standpoint, it just needs story.
No, I would say story is second. A game needs to play well.
And that's the great debate, too.
Yeah.
Does it have to be a good story at the sacrifice of gameplay, a la Mass Effect 1? Or does it have to have good gameplay, but at the sacrifice of story, a la Mass Effect 3?
Well, see, it's weird because like I find Mass Effect 1 has the best story of all 3 games.
It does.
It does, and I remember like when I first played Mass Effect 1, that was the first time I played Mass Effect, so I didn't have Mass Effect 2 or 3 to go by.
So you didn't have another gameplay to work with.
Yeah, so like I find it really difficult to go back and play Mass Effect 1, to actually play the whole game through. I find it very difficult.
Yeah.
But
See,
I'm just glad that I remember the story because that is the best story.
From a story standpoint, yeah. From a story standpoint, I liked Mass Effect 1. It was probably the most solid story. But I also really like Mass Effect 2, just because of, like, it was a lot grittier, and it had the sort of, like, neo-noir feel to it, which is, like, pretty much my kryptonite. A neo-noir space game. It's just like, wow, it's like they just made a game for me. But
yeah.
So, I guess that's like, yeah, you could debate all day whether or not is story or gameplay more important, but because it's kind of weird to think that there are people that are just like, wow, I don't watch cutscenes, I just want to play, right? To me, that's like a cardinal sin. But there are people that do that.
Like, a game is first and foremost a game.
I guess.
Like, you're still interacting with it. So if you're playing something that is just broken, that will take away from the story. Like, gameplay and story are 1-to-1.
Yeah.
In order for me to love a game, it has to have a fantastic story and it has to have great gameplay.
But I mean,
because if I'm playing a game that has a great story but it's broken, I don't want to play it. If I'm playing a game that plays fantastically but has no story, like it has like no story at all, or it's like convoluted. Like hell, even Mario games have stories. Like, they're so bare bones and crap, but
still a story,
and you get exactly what you want and expect out of a Mario game story when you play it. You're not looking for a best screenplay, like an Academy Award for best original screenplay when you play a Mario game. You expect it to be Bowser kidnapped Princess Peach. You have to go rescue Princess Peach. You're expecting that. The story's
she's in
there.
another castle.
Yeah, and then fuck society. There you go.
So what if we take two games? Let's take the original Pac-Man, which has no story. It has no discernible story whatsoever. There's no backstory. There's no save this. There's not even a line that says...
Well, actually, there are characters. There are characters.
Yeah, but the characters are only characters from a gameplay standpoint. Like, the different ghosts have different movement patterns. It's not because of something. It's just because they do something different from a gameplay perspective, right? So I would say that Pac-Man is strictly a gameplay game.
No, it is. You're right.
As close as you're going to get. And then let's look at text-based games.
Oh.
A game that has literally no gameplay other than clicking on something, and it's 100% story. Like, these are two games.
Like, when we started playing games, we were, like, I would say it was the late 90s. That was when games, like 3D games, started to have good stories.
Yeah.
So, like, all I've ever grown up with, all I've ever played, were games, like, the games that I love were always games that played well and had great stories.
But I'm just saying that there are games that, like, a lot of people would argue that Pac-Man was one of the greatest games of all time, right? It was certainly one of the most popular games.
And that's their opinion, and exactly they can think that. But I never played Pac-Man, and I never played those games where you just play it as a game, or like Pong, for instance. Like, Pong had no story, but a lot of people played Pong. And the tragic story of Paddle on the left was fighting against Paddle on the right.
He's suffering from alcoholism. He can't move that fast.
No, he can't. But like, people who played those games, I actually envy the people who played games in like the 80s and all that, because they played games when games were just starting.
They just played games for fun.
Yeah, but like now, like I remember like the first game I think I ever played, like the game that I can remember was like Spyro, which is my whole childhood right there, man.
Yeah.
Spyro was so good. Oh God, Spyro was amazing. Spyro and Crash, but those to see. Like, more emphasis was being put on a story. Like, game development studios were hiring writing teams, and like especially with like Final Fantasy, like in the 80s when like Final Fantasy 1, I haven't played 1 yet. Like, I'm working my way back, but like 1 apparently didn't really like have that much of a story, and then 2 was where a story came in, and then 3 it built up more, and then 4 was where it had a huge epic story, and then 6 apparently the story is just the greatest in the world, and I'm actually playing that game right now. But it's just like, we've got, like, games have evolved where you're pretty much expected to have some form of context to what you're doing in the game.
I actually think that at at the point in time that we're at right now, video games are more of a storytelling medium than anything else.
Or at least game developers are trying to make it like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can agree with you there. But, I mean, it's still important to think about, like, because again, you can have a game that's story driven. And I mean, like, let's take, I haven't played these games, but I've heard that they're story driven, pretty much solely story driven, which is like Gone Home and the Stanley Parable. It's like, it doesn't really necessarily have gameplay in it. I mean, like, you're moving around a space, but it's for the purpose of story. Right? So there's two modern
Stanley
examples.
Parable is entirely story driven.
Yes.
But if you're also talking about like how if the gameplay is any good, you're also thinking of it's how did the game how did the developer envision you to play this game? Like if you're playing like if you're playing like Gone Home or something and you were upset that it was just like a first person adventure game and you didn't do anything else, what did you expect? Like, that's what the game was marketed as. I'll give you an example. Like, there was a show in the Hamilton Fringe Festival that was about supervillains. Like, a friend of mine wrote it, another friend of mine directed it, and one of the reviews they got was negative because the reviewer didn't like that the play was about supervillains.
Okay. So I guess it's an opinion, but a terrible opinion, but an opinion nonetheless.
Yeah. And I've gotten bad reviews. Like I've been in shows that like have had like a bad review and like a reviewer and all that, and like that's your opinion. But when it's like you didn't like this show because it was about supervillains, when the whole concept of the show is about supervillains, it's like telling someone who hates Mario games to review Super Mario Galaxy. Like like someone who hates first-person shooters. Here, you're gonna review Call of Duty 4. But you hate first-person shooters and you've sworn first-person shooters off for the rest of your life. Like a friend of mine who was also in the show, like I like laughed at their review. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, really? Like, it was a show that was marketed as a show that had comic booky themes. It was about supervillains, and your biggest criticism of it, and you didn't even back up your point, was I didn't like it because of supervillains.
Yeah, I get that. It's not constructive criticism at all.
No, it's not, and it's as an example, like if you're like for Journey, I can't picture Journey being played any differently than the way we played it when it came out, because that's how that game company like designed the gameplay around it.
And I think that
now that I think about it, imagine.
I was gonna say I think that game is probably the best example of like storytelling through gameplay, because there's no dialogue, there's no subtitles, there's no nothing. You're just learning by what you're doing.
And that's what I'm hoping more games.
Well, there's a little bit of a tutorial at the start, but
it tells you hit this button to chant or shout.
Hit this button to flip it. Yeah, you got what you mean.
Yeah, like the entire story.
That's just a tutorial though.
That's right.
Yeah. I was gonna say, just imagine like a first-person Journey. Like, try to imagine it.
No, it wouldn't. I don't get it. Or at least the way that I see the game, I just don't see it as anything but the way it was played. Maybe I'm being minded here, but that's just the way I'm looking at it.
Exciting, but it could work.
Like, I'm sure if a developer is on making that game first person, would make the game work as a first-person game, but as Journey is just right now, I don't see
it wouldn't feel the same as the current Journey.
Like, cause like things with like Journey now, like one of the cool things about Journey is when you see your scarf getting longer, you see.
Yeah, I was about to say that.
You'll be like running up.
From a gameplay perspective, I guess the interface is your character. Like that's how you know how well you're doing.
Yeah.
Is by your character's appearance. And then from a first person perspective, you can't see that, right?
Right.
Actually, I have some good news. I got the white cloak in Journey last week.
Ooh, I actually played with someone who had a white cloak in Journey, and that made me very happy. I've only completed the game twice, so I don't know.
Okay.
I didn't cloak everything either.
But I was also going to say, kind of just to wrap this up, looking at games from a gameplay perspective, you could also, or when you're talking about game design, I think it would probably be important to look at everything, like even sports, like how sports play. Because at the end of the day, they're a game, right? You're still playing a game. Or even like chess.
Sports games are my guilty pleasure.
Like, chess has no story. But it's 100%
Unless you
gameplay.
make a story.
Okay, yeah, if you want to like, in a great betrayal, the rook moved to C7 or whatever and took the king.
Yeah.
So, when you talk about chess as chess is a story. It's about two warring empires.
I guess if you want to get that abstract about it, but...
Yeah, there you go.
I side with Danny.
I wouldn't call it a story, a
setup,
maybe, but...
But I also know what you mean going back to what we were talking
Scenario.
before. I do know what you mean about how, like, games that didn't have stories that were made strictly for games. And the unfortunate part for me was I wasn't alive to play those games. I grew up on games that progressively got better and better at telling a good story.
Yeah, and I
One
mean,
of the first games I ever played still has no story.
Which one?
That game is Pokemon Snap. Well, it has
You
story.
had to take pictures of every Pokemon. That was a story.
I like to find the story within things. That's what I find joy out of. Like, I use my imagination to envision a story. Like Pokemon Snap, it's Professor Oak is saying, here, you want to see all the Pokemon in the world, go out journey. And the conflict is he wants to find that Charizard, he can Charizard. And then the even bigger conflict, which is like in the Blu-ray Extended Edition, is he finds Mew. Holy shit, it gets real.
Or, yeah, he doesn't have the Poke-Flute yet, so he has to go back and play the level again.
Yeah, so I like to imagine this kind of stuff. I'm weird like that. I like to imagine it. Like I find the abstract in it, or like I try to at least. Sometimes I don't succeed. Most times I don't.
Yeah, I think from a gameplay perspective, you need to draw more so like you need to draw from every well rather than just one. Is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
And so to find out what a modern game needs, back to the topic, I think it needs to be a game, and you can just kind of say that you can kind of draw from every well, like I was saying, where it's like to say, okay, this game did this and this game did that. I can kind of take from that aspect and build on it for my game today, and use those aspects of either gameplay or story to make a better game, right? Not necessarily steal, but I mean that's how art works, is that it's constantly developing on itself.
Built upon.
Yes.
Yeah.
So. Okay. Yeah. No, I see what you mean.
What does a modern game need?
Nerdcast.
Yes.
This has been my favorite
high
Nerdcast.
society. Talk about theater and music and art and game design.
Like a lot of what we've been talking about on Nerdcast today is stuff that I've always wanted to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Is the way I look at it. Like music and games.
So
like,
we
never really touch upon that.
When I say, do you have any topics? No. Just, if you have a topic, we can talk about it.
Like, I've given topics before. Like, I gave the game streaming idea. I've given ideas in the past, but you like your secret shit. You like to make me think on the spot, and you know how bad I am.
This is the first time I did secret topics, and it was only because I knew that
I had
we
don't record. Like, we record in, like, there's a long delay in when we record sometimes, and it seems new every time.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
And I just realized that we had a topic that we didn't get to, but we don't have enough time for that. So next time.
Yeah. Oh well.
But yeah, I think it's been good. If you have any opinions, audience, on what we talked about, feel free to get them to us, whatever way is best for you.
Also, this is Danny preaching here. If to all our listeners, all X number of you, if you love something but you are not in that program, switch into that program, because that is why I'm in theater.
That's why I'm doing game design.
I was in environmental science beforehand. I still like environmental science. Don't get me wrong.
And now, real talk from Danny.
We're gonna end up
do
like life advice.
Soothing voice, Danny.
But anyway, listeners, like, just do what you love, which is why I love theater, and that's why I love talking about games and movies and music with Will and Lee here. Just do what you love. Don't do what other people tell you to do. Live your own life.
Find your passion, because in 20 years, whatever job you're doing now, robots will be doing it.
That's very fair. That's That's a very good point. I never actually thought of that. And now, drop the mic. There we go. Sorry, I just wanted to do that.
Yeah. This was episode 33. We thank you for listening.